Should steroid dosages be amped up, pyramided up slowly, or should you go right to the effective dosage? Stay tuned, and I'll let you know. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RX Television, RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your 30-minute weekly question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. Whatever is on your mind, be it bodybuilding, non-bodybuilding, it is all on the table. We're going to go right into the questions. The first two questions on this show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. First question about a video that Bill Phillips posted on Facebook saying that keeping blood sugar between 80 to 100 is the fat-burning zone, and 100 to 120 is the muscle-building zone. Any truth to this?
You know, I was a little confused when I heard you say blood sugar. I almost felt like it should have been heart rate in cardio, but I don't think it was. I think Bill Phillips got some wacky ideas about, blood sugar maintenance. To be honest with you guys, blood sugar levels are maintained by the body. So there's no way to really adjust what your blood sugar levels are unless you're to take insulin, of course, you know what I mean? But obviously, if you're eating more food in the off season, okay, your blood sugars will tend to run a little higher post meals because it's going to take longer to lower the blood sugars, where if you're eating low carbs, your body can lower blood sugar really quickly. So, I mean, it's kind of intuitive that your blood sugar levels between meals would be lower, if you're on a low carb diet than if you ate a high carb diet, unless your blood sugar control was bad, in which case, that doesn't apply. But for the average person whose blood sugar control is good, if you're eating low carbs, you're going to lower blood sugar quicker after a meal. I mean, the proof of that is that when you're dieting and you eat a meal, you feel great. And then like an hour, even maybe in my case, it used to be a half hour late, I'd be starving already. And I'm sure had I taken my blood sugar back then, because we didn't have blood sugar monitors, it probably would have been on the lower side. Whereas if I would have eaten, 100 grams of carbs in a meal, 2 hours after my meal, it probably still would have been, my blood sugar still would have been at a reasonably high level. So, what he's saying is really what happens naturally. You don't have to induce that, and you really can't induce that to happen. Like I said, originally I thought he was talking about heart rate, but I think he was talking about blood sugar.
Second question, again, these first two questions from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Question about bicep building. Lower reps, like 4 to 6, okay for biceps. And why do you suggest cables over dumbbells?
I've done a lot of experimenting with arm growth. I had a lot of trouble. Matter of fact, my father once said to me, and I probably told the story before, when I was told I wanted to be a bodybuilder and I was competing, he's like, you don't have arms like those other guys, which is a huge insult. But he was true. He was right. He's like, you have those lean. I had like lean, long arms that I didn't have just Ronnie Coleman biceps. But I, over the course of my career, I actually got up to about 22, 23 inch arms. It took a long time though. And what I learned was that guys with long arms don't do well by conventional exercise. And when I say conventional arm building exercise, I'm talking about like barbell curls, dumbbell curls. Dumbbells a little better, but barbell curls specifically, because for some reason your arm is out here, whereas a short guy, his arm is like close to his body and he's feeling it more in the bicep. I watched Lee Priest do, barbell curls, and I could tell his biceps are just blowing out. And I used to train with guys that were shorter, stockier guys, and I could tell they were getting way more out of barbell curls. I was getting nothing out of it. I was feeling front delts. it was like I just didn't have a good contraction in the bicep. I wasn't feeling it there. But I told you, Vince Taylor, I read an article by him, and we talked about this, him and I, about, he felt that cable curls were the best because they kept continuous tension on the muscle. So I'd gone through an arthroscopic shoulder surgery, and I was kind of rehabbing myself. And I said, well, I'll start with some light cable work. And I was noticing I'm doing light cable biceps, and I'm like, man, my arms feel like they're going to explode. This is the most I've ever felt my arms during an arm workout. And I did it with triceps too. And I was like, this is unbelievable. I said, you know what? If I'm not feeling the muscle working during these heavy compound barbell movements, maybe I'm not getting anything out of it. And that's why my arms aren't growing. So I started doing all cable work, and I started getting really strong on cables because my arms started to grow. And I realized that unilateral cable movements for arms, for people who have very long arms or longer than normal arms and have trouble with arm development, seem to be the best way to make them grow. Never ask a guy who's got great arm genetics what they do, because they can do anything and they grow. Think Ronnie Coleman, Lee Priest, the guys with some of the best arms in the business, Evan Centopani. Don't ask those guys. Ask guys like me that had to work for every millimeter of arm growth I've ever gotten. And I'm telling you, cable movements are the way to go. Full range of motion with those things, unilateral, one arm at a time. Squeeze that muscle, and you'll be shocked at how strong you get. I do stuff on the cable machine even now at 57 years old. People look at me, they're like, how the heck do you lift so much weight on the cables with such good form? I said, I've been doing it for 20 years, and I've just built strength. You'd be shocked at how weak most people are on cables because of the fact that they don't do them all the time. So if you don't feel a muscle work, the take-home message is if you don't feel a muscle work, then it's not working.
Let's go to our questions from our YouTube community page, from our social media outlets. This is the one that we teased the episode with. How many milligrams per week would you recommend increasing test when wrapping up from a cycle from TRT to a cycle from TRT doses? I chose to go 250, 375, 500 for 6 weeks, and then level out at 750 for 6 weeks. Your thoughts?
I don't know if it was Bill Phillips who came up with the whole pyramiding of dosages up. It probably wasn't, but he was the one who popularized it, where you had like weeks 1 through 2, you did this many milligrams, week 3 through 4, you increased it to this, week 5 through 6, you increased it to this, and week 7 through 8, you increased it to the final dosage. And then you'd go off. But that's back when guys did cycles for 8 weeks. No one does cycles for 8 weeks. And we realized that the longer you're on, the more you solidify the gain, so that 8-week cycles are really not doing anything. You need, 16 weeks at least to really get some substantial gains. So, once we did that, I started to think about this whole concept. If I'm going to stay on longer, and these compounds are long-acting injectables that take, 2-3 weeks to get into your system, what's the purpose of ramping up? Find your effective dosage where you build. This is once you're past the beginner stage, of course. Find your effective dosage, what it is. And for me, it was 1,000 milligrams of testosterone a week, and let's say 400 milligrams of Deca a week. I'm just giving you for instance of a cycle I would do. And just go right to that dosage, because they're long acting. And they're not all going to come into your system at one time anyway. It's going to take 3 weeks for those to ramp themselves up. And I just started off like that. And I found that it was just as effective as the pyramiding dose. And it didn't require me to think, how many milligrams I got to do this week? How many milligrams I got to do? So I always say, take the effective dosage that you're going to ultimately use in your cycle for whatever it is, 12, 16 weeks, whatever you're going to take, 24 weeks, whatever, however long you're going to be on, and go right to the effective dose. And then if you're going to switch compounds at some point, go right to the effective dose of the new compounds. If you're going to go 1,000 test, 400 Deca, and then you're going to switch to 1,000 test, 400 EQ, just go right to the 400 EQ once you get to the next, 8 weeks or mini cycle. And I find that works well. It's easy. You don't have to think about how much you're going to do. And I don't think there's any negative or any positive to doing it either way. But I think that it's just easier and once again, more effective.
Interesting philosophical question here, I guess, if you want to look at the state of peptides and PEDs now and then projecting into the future. Will the quote-unquote new era of peptides replace PEDs in the near future, in your opinion?
I love this question, Sid. I'm going to tell you why. Because everyone keeps asking me this, and they always ask me not even about PEDs. There's like the new myostatin inhibitors that are going to be coming out. They're like, everyone's always like, this is going to replace steroids. The steroids going to be like archaic. It's going to be like, like barbaric. No one's going to use it. Let me tell you something about this industry. I've been in this industry a long time. Every time a new anabolic agent comes out, guess what happens? It gets added on to the stack. It doesn't replace anything. No one replaces anything. They just add it on. When growth hormone came out, you think people stopped taking as much steroids? They took more steroids with the GH. When peptides came out, you think people stopped taking, steroids? No, they added the peptides on top of the steroids. When GLP-1 agonists came out to burn fat, do you think people stopped taking clenbuterol and T3? No, they added it on top of the clenbuterol and T3. When myostatin inhibitors come out, when they finally get something that works, they'll just stack it on top of that. When new peptides are come out, they'll stack it on top of that. That's the way. That's the mentality of what we do in our industry. Now, is it unhealthy? Maybe not. Because they're hitting different areas and different receptors. Now, if there's interactions between something, if they find a replacement for anabolic steroids that do the same thing and stimulate the androgen receptor more effectively than anabolics, well, then we might have a replacement for anabolics. Then people might stop taking them. But until that time, the most potent muscle building substance you can put into your body is testosterone still. There's nothing more potent than that. Nothing has replaced it. GH hasn't replaced it. Peptides haven't replaced it, which obviously GH is a peptide. We don't have any myostatin. Nothing is as effective as steroids. So if you took nothing else and you just took testosterone, you would probably be almost as good as everyone else, okay? Because the other stuff is just adds a little bit more. But by and far, testosterone and the anabolic steroids are still the most potent muscle building agents on the planet. And they have been for the last 70 years, or 60, 70 years since they've been around.
Question about bulking. Why do you need to bulk to build new muscle? You can only add so much new muscle tissue at a daily rate that it won't need so much, quote unquote, excessive energy.
No, you don't need to bulk. Bulking just means it's a fancy way of saying I'm trying to put muscle on, okay? For some people, like people with metabolisms like I have, it means eating an enormous amount of food. Because what happens is when you start increasing calorie intake, whether it be protein, fat, carbs, it doesn't matter, your body's natural inclination is to speed up the metabolic rate to burn these extra calories up. Now, in a person who's got a blast furnace for a metabolism like me, when my body speeds itself up, I burn an astronomical amount of calories over and beyond what I would normally do if I was just in maintenance phase. Like right now, I don't eat a lot of food during the day, and I don't lose weight. But if I would up my calories and up my food intake, my metabolism would speed up, and I would have to, it would be like I have to add a lot more food to gain weight. And that's the problem. Now, some people don't require that. Some people, you could add 30 grams of carbs to their program per day for the whole day, and all of a sudden they start gaining weight because it's enough extra nutrition that their body now is not going to use protein and fat for fuel. It's going to use those extra carbs it gave the body, and the protein and fat will be exclusively used for building and repairing muscle. If I increase carbs by 50 grams per day and I'm trying to gain weight, my body will blow through that in 3 seconds, and it'll start using the protein I'm eating and turning that into carbs for fuel, or using the fat that I'm eating for fuel, and it won't use those nutrients for building and repairing muscle. So everyone's body's a little different, and that's why when we talk about off season, you can't just give one generalized diet for everyone. It's really dependent on what your metabolic rate is.
Question about burnout when it comes to dieting. How do you deal with an overwhelming feeling of burnout from training and dieting? I guess I would add to that, where you're in the depths of contest prep when it seems like the whole world's going dark.
Yeah. Sometimes I've hit those points myself, and I was like, you know what? I look like shit. I'm not getting any better. I look worse. I'm flat. I have no strength. And you know what? Sometimes that's a signal from your body to saying, you know what? Go take a day off. It's hard to do. Let me tell you. When you want to be your absolute best, you think if you take a day off, you're going to fall behind and you're going to look shitty. But you know what? I've had days, and it's not a lot of these days. It's one here and there during a diet where I just feel terrible. I'm almost getting almost like a depression feeling. And I just go out and I have a meal someplace. I might go to the diner, like in New York when I used to live in New York. I'd go to a diner myself and order something that I normally would not order. And I kind of just putz around. I wouldn't train that day. And I'd be like, you know what? Maybe I won't do the show. I kind of give myself like a vacation day which is hard for me to do because I'm a super type A motivated person. And invariably the next day, I always feel so much better and so much more motivated. You wake up and you look in the mirror, you're like, holy shit, I look so good right now. I can't wait to go to the gym now. I can't wait to follow the diet. So when you hit that point, sometimes you got to just take a break. I have clients that also, they're going like 5, 6, 7, 8 days in a row. They haven't lost a pound. They swear to me they're not cheating. They look really depleted. I'll give them a day off. I'll say no cardio for the next 2 days. I'll give them like a cheat meal or something like that, or I'll give them some high carb days. And then all of a sudden, 2 days later, they've lost weight and they haven't even worked out because their body just needed that break. So you got to know when that time is. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, the minute they feel a little bit of pain, they think they got to cheat or do something to counteract that. That's not always the case. That's why it's good to have a coach.
What is the reasoning behind using EQ, Deca, NPP, and combo with Masteron in a build phase with a test phase? It seems to be, or at least seems to me to be a bit contradictory in terms of the aim of compounds, but the cycle is mentioned often nowadays, if not Masteron, for AI purposes. Give
me the cycle again, Sid.
Yeah, so he's saying that EQ, Deca, NPP in combo with Masteron in a build phase with the test phase. And then he says that it's contradictory, I guess, the aim of the compounds, but the cycle is mentioned nowadays, I guess, mentioned often nowadays, whatever like that.
So it's test NPP and what else? Masteron?
Test NPP, EQ, and Deca in combination with Masteron.
NPP in combination, but that's a lot of compounds. I don't ever recommend that anyone take that many drugs at one time, off season to try to grow, or it just seems, first of all, NPP and Deca are pretty much the same thing. Deca is just a long-acting version. Deca has better anti-inflammatory effects. NPP is shorter acting. I never used NPP ever my whole career. I always stuck with Deca because if I'm going to use an androlone compound, at least I want to get the anti-inflammation effects from it. So I wouldn't combine those two for sure. As far as Masteron, EQ, and Deca, Deca and EQ kind of do similar things. You can still use them. Like when I start guys off on the first 8 weeks of their contest prep, I usually do EQ test and I put a little Deca in there for the anti-inflammation, because when you first start dieting, a lot of times your joints start hurting you a little bit. That's fine, but I don't know if I would throw Masteron necessarily into that mix. The last 8 weeks before a competition, I usually do Masteron, testosterone, winstrol, trenbolone. I'll do a combination like that. There's really no rules when it comes to anabolics. You can pretty much do what you want. I always find that in the off season, you're better off not mixing too many different compounds. This way you can kind of keep your receptors clean. So do testosterone plus another anabolic, maybe 2 anabolics the most. This way, after 8 weeks, you can switch to another 2 or 1 or 2 anabolics. If you do everything all at once, what are you switching to? There's nothing left, So maybe do testosterone, EQ, and Deca, the first 8 weeks, then go to maybe testosterone, Masteron, and NPP. That's something that would be a better strategy rather than throw everything in all at once.
Take one more question. This one is about GH and insulin timing, training days versus rest days, and the most optimal way to use insulin to carb. So it's a 2-part question. So GH insulin timing on training versus rest, and then I guess the best way to use insulin in a carb up situation.
Look, I've said this before. The conventional wisdom when GH first came out was take it at night before bed, because that's when your body releases it, right? And that was done up. That was standard practice in the 90s. Initially, but I thought about it for a minute. I think I'm the one who changed the whole idea, and I'm not trying to take credit for anybody. I think I'm the one who put it out there first. I said, why would you want to take growth hormone? First of all, when you take GH, it's not like taking testosterone. You don't shut down your pituitary function of GH. Whereas testosterone works on a different, feedback. It goes hypothalamus, pituitary, testicles, and that feeds back on the hypothalamus. You don't get that with GH because GH is released like insulin, pulsatile all day long. But the majority of the growth hormone is released after vigorous exercise and at night. So if your growth hormone is naturally released at night, why would you want to take your GH shot at night? Now, if you were trying to induce GH release, like with a GH releasing agent, it might be a good idea to take that at night because you can then force your body to produce more. But if you're actually taking the drug itself, the actual growth hormone compound, you don't want to inhibit your body's production of the natural production at night. Let your body naturally produce it at night. And then I said to myself, well, when does GH not get produced in the morning? Well, it never gets produced in the morning. In the morning, cortisol levels are the highest and GH levels are the lowest. So I said, well, that's when our body is the most catabolic. So that is when I would recommend taking GH. So I started taking my growth hormone in the morning with breakfast. And, GH, when you first take it, can actually lower blood sugar a little bit because it causes IGF-1 release from the liver, which has an insulin-like effect, which is not good at night if you're trying to go to sleep and you're dieting and all of a sudden your blood sugar drops and you wake up starving, which is that was the original problem that I initially noticed. And then I thought about it. I said, why don't I just take it in the morning? And I found that I grew much better that way. I recovered better because I was now counteracting the catabolic nature of the morning. And it worked better that way. As far as insulin timing and carbing up, you can do it two ways. The great thing about Walmart is, and I've said this before, is they sell Novolin R. I've talked about Novolin N, which is a long-acting insulin, but we're talking about now carbing up. Novolin R is a moderately fast-acting insulin. It has two release times. It releases initially half of the dose you take, and then 2 hours later, it releases the other half of the dose. The good thing about that is you can get it without a prescription from Walmart for $25. So what you can do is a shot of that will cover 2 meals, if you're assuming you're eating every 2 hours, which most men bodybuilders are. So if you took like a 10 IU shot with breakfast, okay, that would cover 50 grams because every 1 unit of fast-acting insulin covers 10 grams of carbs, but you're only getting half of it released initially. So that covers 50. And then if you ate another 50 grams of carbs with your next meal 2 hours later, that would cover another 50 grams. So 1 shot of Novolin R covers 2 meals. So you can do 1 shot in the morning of 10 IUs, assuming you're carbing with 50 grams of carbs. If you're only carbing with 40 grams of carbs per meal, you do 8 IUs. And then at the third meal, you would do another shot, and that would cover the next 2 meals. So you'd cover meal 1, 2, 3, and 4. I mean, you could do a third one, but most people don't, at night, you don't want to start messing with longer acting or faster acting insulins. But if you're eating 6 big meals with 6 big carb meals, you can ostensibly do a third shot, at night. And that would cover all 6 meals. Now, if you have access to a fast acting insulin like Humalog or Novolog, you can just do a shot with every meal. In which case, if you were eating 40 grams of carbs, you take 4 units at every meal. So, I mean, you can do it that way. Not many people need that much insulin or need to take insulin to carb up, but if you wanted to, you can do that. The problem is that you have to make sure you're eating enough carbs for the insulin that you're taking. And, like I said, I always find that taking insulin is tricky because a lot of times guys can smooth out, the water can go to the wrong place, especially when you're the last day of the show, when you're restricting fluid. Exogenous insulin, that means insulin that you inject, doesn't work well when you're dehydrated. So you would think, all right, I took 5 units of Humalog or Novolog, I ate 50 grams of carbs, but I tested my blood sugar and it's high. What's going on? Well, because it doesn't work when you're dehydrated. Ask any type 1 diabetic. If they get dehydrated, especially like if their blood sugars get too high and they start peeing glucose and losing fluid, they can't get their blood sugar down. It's like a runaway train almost. So once again, I always tell people, if you look great a week out from a show, don't start doing kooky shit the last week. It's usually unnecessary.
That's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. Again, all new episode of the After Hours podcast, Heavy Muscle Radio on the channel. If you haven't already done so, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. You're not going to miss this or any other shows and segments that we have on this channel. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.